Hanakako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina, president of the Grassroots Institute. Once in a while, I get to have a friend on board here to talk about things that are important for our state, for our lives, and also just fun to listen to. Here's a man who has experienced a great deal of variety in his career life, and he's overall been devoted to serving people. I'm delighted to have with us today Elwin Ahu, former attorney, judge, and pastor, today running for office. Elwin, welcome.
Thank you, Keli'i.
Well, Elwin, perhaps you'll become a lieutenant governor of the state of Hawaii. Did you ever imagine that when you set out on your career in law?
Never in my wildest dreams would I imagine this, this day coming. And yeah, it's been a fun ride, though.
Well, you've been doing so many different things. Is any one of your careers the most fun or fulfilling, or do they all have their own special delight?
They're all careers, and when people talk about my life, and I, get into conversations with friends or people who meet me for the first time, and they hear about what I've been through, they will always ask me, so when are you going to write your book?
Oh, there you go. Everything you've done has had some kind of set of values, whether it was the law, whether it was serving as a judge, or then as a pastor. And I'll ask you about that later on. But where do your values come from? Is that your upbringing?
They come from my upbringing. They come from just my whole life put together. I don't think you can segment your life into different chapters as one would expect or imagine. And so when people ask me about writing a book, it's an ongoing journey. And over the years, you establish certain foundational building blocks that you kind of hear it clicking in place, and it becomes that upon which you now stand as an older adult.
Well, you made an interesting transition when you left the bench and went into the Christian ministry. And I don't think I've ever sat down and really asked you about that.
Yeah.
How did that take place?
Oh, a lot of things went on in my mind, in my heart. When I grew up, first of all, I grew up in Pearl City, and we played a lot as kids. Pearl City wasn't as active as it is now, development-wise. A lot of cane fields, a lot of watercress patches. So we grew up not really having so much ambitions in mind. And as I grew up and I went into college, the law school here was looking for more Hawaiian students to apply.
So you went to Richardson?
I went to Richardson. I was going to school undergrad in Iowa at the time. And so, I want to get back home. And so I applied and got into the law school. And thought I'd be practicing law, which I did for 15 years, and then got appointed to the bench. And I thought that was it. That's my career. To be a judge after being a lawyer for that long is something you shoot for.
Right.
I would have a reserved parking in downtown Honolulu.
That's worth a lot in itself.
Yeah, I'd have a staff. People would stand up and recognize you when you walk into the courtroom. So it was really good.
And you had a wardrobe.
Yeah, I had a set wardrobe. And so, you don't think of anything beyond that again. You think the chapter of your life has concluded, and now you'll just live out the rest of your life being a judge. But there are some things that were not quite right in my personal life. So I found a church. I began attending this church, and it began to zero in on some things that I needed to change, which I did. And then I began to sense this just deep desire to help people, which had been in my heart all this time. Sometimes when you get into law, you can forget the fact that you are really there to serve people, and it becomes a law business.
I can imagine the law, especially being a judge, requires you to wield a double-edged sword for justice and for compassion.
Right.
Did you find those in tension with each other at any time?
It depends on the cases. There's some cases where this guy just needs some help, and so you got to pull out that sword. Prison becomes an end point for him. But there was something in my heart to always help people. When I graduated from law school, my first job was actually with legal aid. And I had clerked with them for a couple of years while I was in law school, seeing how people needed help, because you're dealing with clientele that has nowhere else to go. But then a friend said, hey, public interest law is what you do at the end of your career. You need to make money now.
That's right, after you've made your fortune.
Yeah. So I jumped into public defender's office. Was another public service kind of a job. Then I got into private practice. And there was money to be made there. But then again, that stirring in my heart to help, to serve the public, kind of rose up again, and by recommendations of others, how they saw me in the courtroom as a litigator, as well as trying to settle cases with different litigants and parties. They said, you know, you should apply and be a judge, because you'd be great at looking at the whole picture and bringing us to a resolution. So I did, and I got appointed to the district court bench first, then the circuit court bench, but never ministry. Never thought about ministry.
So how did that take place? What a shift from the bench to the pulpit.
Yeah. Again, there was just a deep desire to help people. And although you are a public servant as a judge, there was a time, I can't pinpoint the exact day, but there was a point in time where I began to realize that as a judge, as much good that you can do on the bench, you're receiving the case pretty much after all the damage has been done. And so, the public would come and they would say, fix it, judge. Throw him in jail. Put him in jail, throw away the key. Or put him in drug counseling, or fix the problem. And I got to thinking one day that the damage is done. This man's life is ruined, his family, the relationships, he's without a job. How can I move to the front end of a problem so we can prevent these guys from getting into prison? So,
well, now when you became a pastor, you were an associate of a very well-known pastor here, Wayne Cordero, and part of the New Hope movement. But you eventually went out on your own and started one of the New Hope churches, one of the fastest growing churches here in Hawaii. So this was no small endeavor. You had thousands of people in your congregation. And if anyone were to look at success in ministry, and of course those in ministry are supposed to think of faithfulness and servanthood, not success, you definitely had that success, at least to external eyes. And all of a sudden, you decided, well, I'm going to throw my hat into the rink and go into politics, in which you've had no experience whatsoever. How did that happen?
Well, again, I think if you were to look back, the common thread throughout this entire book, if we're going to call it that, the common thread, the common theme was, how do I help? How can I help? And
well, how would you help people beyond the role of being a pastor to thousands of people? That, I would think, is a significant helping role. You're helping people to come in contact with something that will transform their lives. You're building a community. You're reaching out. So what does politics give you that goes beyond that, at least at this stage in your life?
I think it gives you a wider breadth of who you can connect with. And I've been noticing that and learning that along this campaign trail. So where it's a statewide office, I get to meet with so many different individuals that I would not have had I stayed just as a pastor.
Now, I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, but part of that story, wasn't it, between the pastorate and politics, you faced a very real health challenge. And I'm wondering how you came out of that health challenge without saying, well, now it's time for me just to sit back and enjoy my career as it is. But instead, you're starting from scratch in a new career.
Yeah. There's certain defining moments that happened in my life. By that I mean certain points, certain episodes that took place where it really caused me to stop and say, wait a minute, okay, what's really going on around here? And, coming to the point where I left the bench to get involved with this ministry was one. Another was we adopted this boy from China. That changed our lives completely. This point where we had started a new church. So I had been with this church that you had referred to earlier for about 12 years. And then we started a new church. And within a year of starting that church, I get diagnosed with leukemia. And it was through going to seek medication for the child that we had adopted from China, which would not have happened had I not gone into this ministry. Leaving the bench and getting into this church allowed me to go on this mission trip to China to adopt this child. I'm going to the doctor to get medication for this child. And the doctor says, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. Take a blood test. And I took the blood test, and that's how they discovered leukemia. Wow. So we progressed through that.
How did you react when you got the news?
You're kind of speechless. because there were no symptoms. There was no trace in my history, no family history of leukemia.
Now, this wasn't that long ago,
No.
so you have gone through a full cycle. What is your current prognosis?
Currently, the doctor actually has used the word healed. It looks like you're healed. I go back still for 3-month checkups, and they'll do a blood test again. And he says, no, it looks like you're healed. It's not going to come back. I say, well, I'm making this run. And he says, yeah, I know. I said, well, any precautions about that? He said, no, you're completely normal. Everything's back to normal.
You talk about healing, and of course, in your case, you attribute that to a divine power, someone whom you believe is also a moral lawgiver. And we're going to take a short break. But what I want to ask you when you come back is to talk about how you reconcile positions you take as a pastor who believes in a certain divine morality and somebody who serves in the public in a very diverse community like Hawaii, where there are many different opinions about what morality is all about. Thank you so much. This has been fascinating so far. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, interviewing Elwin Ahu, who is a candidate for lieutenant governor in the 2014 general election. And we're going to be right back on ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network after this short message. Don't go away.
Aloha, welcome to ThinkTech Hawaii. My name is Josh Green. I'm the host of a program called Healthcare in Hawaii. I'm a physician. I work in the emergency department on the Big Island. I also serve in the state senate, which, please don't hold that against me, doesn't detract from my television program. We speak about all the big healthcare issues in the state. We get together on Tuesdays from 2 o'clock till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and we try to talk about the most important issues in healthcare. This is a terrific venue for people to learn about healthcare. There are many programs on this station. We broadcast it later, not just on the internet, but also on OC16. Thanks for joining us. Please be informed healthcare consumers.
Welcome back to Ehana Kako. That means let's work together. That's what we say at the Grassroots Institute, and we're so grateful for the partnership of ThinkTech Hawaii to put on this weekly program. I'd like to say thanks to Jay Fidel, producer here at ThinkTech, and all of the great volunteers who make it possible for our programs to go across the world. Today I'm interviewing Elwin Ahu, former attorney, a judge, currently a pastor, and now a candidate for lieutenant governor here in the state of Hawaii. And I've thrown him probably one of the questions that could be the toughest for him to answer in terms of his campaign. Elwin, you know that here in the state of Hawaii, we deeply value our diversity. In fact, that is one of the highest values that is shared by the people here. It's a place that accepts all people of all backgrounds. It's a place that believes in equal opportunity. And I know you believe in those values. Yet in the past several years, there's been a tension, sometimes between people of faith who have a clearly defined sense of what is moral, what is family values, and so forth, and a community that doesn't share those values. Now, as a pastor, you're definitely called to articulate the views of your faith. But as you move into the public sphere and serve the broader community of people, how are you going to navigate having a deep personal faith and moral vision with serving the broad community?
That's a great question, Keli'i, because as a candidate and as a person, should I get elected to that office, you become a public servant for the entire state of Hawaii, and it's all faiths, it's all different walks of life. But I don't see myself setting aside the things that I believe in. First of all, I want to make sure that people understand that it's not a new thing. It's not new for someone who has a belief in faith to be in political office. Senator Dan Akaka, great man of faith. I know him, I know his family well. Loves the Lord. But he does not set that aside to be in office. Senator Danny Noy, he was a member of a church. I went to his office when there was an event that happened and they needed a pastoral prayer. He invited me to be there, to be a part of that. You have many who are in public office who are men and women of faith. So it's not something that's brand new. How I would reconcile it is I use my faith, as I do in my everyday life, as a moral compass that keeps me stabilized. It's almost like a gyroscope, if you will. You know, when things get a little rough, things get a little unsteady, I go back to what are the things that I believe in, what are the foundational values, what are the building blocks that's been set apart in my life. I refer to them as core values. Core values are values that are non-negotiable. They're there. And so it allows me to, okay, so if that's what's happening in the world, what's going on with this issue, okay, what do I stand on? Let me center myself first.
Sure.
And then I can make a decision.
You know, sometimes, Elwin, there has been such tension in the public sphere between those who have a certain moral vision, those who have a different moral vision in terms of the equality and treatment of people. What are your strategies as a public figure for approaching some of that tension and making our community a workable community where we all are advancing toward a better Hawaii?
Yeah, I think I start with the number one value in my life, or one of the top values of my life, is that everyone is valuable. Every single person is valuable. It doesn't matter what their belief is, doesn't matter what their walk of life is, where they've come from, where they are right now. Every single person is valuable. It was in my courtroom, same way. Any litigant, any party that was before me was a person that I valued. Now, because I start there, what is the best for that person? How can we shape a plan or a policy that's going to affect their life so that they are valued as a person?
You obviously stand for the First Amendment rights, something that belongs to everyone in our land. Yeah. How would you respond to your critics who may say, you know, behind that nice smile, easygoing nature is really, shall we say, a one-issue candidate? There's really a very specific kind of family values that he wants to impose on everyone. I'm not at all trying to characterize what you're doing, but if you receive that kind of criticism, how do you respond to that?
Yeah, well, there'll always be critics. I've learned that. Yeah, I've learned that from being a lawyer and being, a judge. As a judge, 50% of our crowd were always upset with you.
Absolutely.
You always had a winner and a loser. So it's nothing new to me.
So that doesn't, just to have peace and harmony is not your major motivation. You're not afraid of controversy.
No, I'm not afraid of controversy. I'm homegrown. Hawaii is my home. Grew up here, went away to school a few years, but Hawaii is my home. And I want to see Hawaii be the best Hawaii ever. And that includes everyone. And so when someone says, oh, you're just a single issue person. No, man. Our community is made up of so many people with so many different issues.
That's right.
And I want to help us as much as I can. I'm not saying that I'm the silver bullet. I'm not saying that, I'm the expert in all these areas. But I have such a heart for this home, especially when I look at our kids.
Well, I've talked with you on many occasions, and I know you care deeply about our economy, a more affordable economy. You care deeply about education, a great education for everyone. You care about Hawaii's role in the future and in the Pacific and so forth. So how do you approach some of these broader issues, going into office not as the main policy maker, but as a partner to a governor? If you are elected, if Duke Iona, your gubernatorial running mate, becomes governor, if you become lieutenant governor, how do you lead from that position? How do you make a difference and yet be supportive of your running mate?
Yeah, and I've learned from prior experiences on how to lead, or how I term it is, how do you lead from the second chair? Because many times, people don't like to play the second fiddle. But in every orchestra, you need a second fiddle to create harmony.
Well, if you don't mind me saying, in terms of your career as pastor, you began working with a very prominent pastor, not as second fiddle per se, but assisting him, and eventually you have become a senior pastor yourself.
Yeah, so I would look at it, and the strongest factor that I bring into the team is the fact that I know how to be a complementary leader. Complementary. I don't see myself as a partner. I guess how you define that, because he is the governor. He is the governor. He will always be the governor. I come in as a complementary factor in there. And by that I mean, as he's pursuing a certain policy or a certain strategy, I come in and see what can I do to support that. How can I serve him? Many times it'll be involvement in the community. He may be dealing with more of the major parts of the strategy of the plan. I come in and see how the community can be supported with that, because we need everybody.
Yes.
To make whatever plan work, whether it's education or economy or energy, we need everybody in the state to come together and say, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to finally get it done.
Benjamin Franklin called the vice presidency an office that should be entitled His Supreme Superfluousness. Totally unnecessary. Sometimes people think that there's only one role that the lieutenant governor or the vice president plays, and that is to step into the main seat when called upon. Other than that, he just sits in his office and twiddles his thumbs. But what is your vision of the role you'd play as lieutenant governor?
It's much bigger than that. It can be whatever you want it to be. I really believe that. I looked at the laws, whatever job descriptions. It can become whatever you want it to be. And I believe that Duke and I share the vision that it'll be a much more involved office, because, like I said, we need every single person to move this state forward. We've been at standstill for too long. We've been at a stalemate. We've always been the highest cost of living. You hear those stats being thrown out all the time, again and again. Every single election cycle is the same thing. And I think we're done with staying in a stalemate. We got to move this forward. And so it'll take a partnership or complementary leadership. So he'll take a segment, I can look at a different segment. I think my strength is trying to organize and bring in community support. How do we support that?
Yes. Now, I don't need to tell you that Hawaii is really run by some long-standing institutions, corporate world, a single party, the Democratic Party, unions, and so forth. And you and Duke would come in as a minority. Even if elected, your legislature would be predominantly Democrat. Your congressional delegation will be predominantly Democrat, and so forth. And then, again, you have the unions. So, as a minority, how do you approach bringing about positive change, or even getting some of your agenda out there with the broader community?
I live by a standard or a value that everything rises and falls on relationships. And I think in the roles that I've played in the past, whether it be as a lawyer, I'm advocating for one side, but still I need to build that relationship with the other side, whether we're going to settle or we're going to go to trial. As a judge, we have to immediately develop a relationship with the attorneys and the parties involved to move the case along. As a pastor, I pastor Democrats and Republicans. I pastor union members and non-union members.
You mean your church is not just filled with Republicans?
No way, not at all.
I'm just going to interject this question about how many people in your church have been politically active before your candidacy.
Not very many. But I have both sides, and that's why I made it a point when I announced the candidacy. I said, in our church, we are not going to talk about Democrat Republicans, because I know we have both parties in here. And I had an older couple, and they came to me and they're in tears saying that they thought they had to leave our church because I was going to run for office. And I said, why? He said, well, because my husband's pension is paid by the union, and we're always campaigning for the unions. And I assured them, I said, look, every single person is welcome here. And I reassured them that it would not interfere with our friendship. And they were so elated to hear that. It was a relief, a weight from their shoulders. And they have been one of our most faithful servants in our church.
That story tells us something we know, and that is that there's a lot of misunderstanding. A misunderstanding in the public about politics, about what it means to belong to one party, about union and so forth. How are you going to be reaching out and creating a better understanding of how things work?
I think people need to be educated more. I think many times it is the uninformed that it raises up some fears because they are uninformed of either the issues or really what's going on. And what's going to help settle much of that is when you talk about values. when you talk about different values that you believe in. So you're not looking at a candidate based on party lines. You're looking at a candidate that matches your values.
I think that's important. I want to talk a little bit more about values with you when we return from a very short break. You're listening to Elwin Ahu, candidate for Lieutenant Governor in the 2014 general election in Hawaii. He's also a pastor of one of the fastest growing churches here in Honolulu. We'll be right back after this short message. I'm Keli'i Akina on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. Aloha.
Aloha, hello. My name is Hong Jiang, and I host ThinkTech Asia every Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. At our show, we talk about issues that are important in Asia, such as environment, culture, history, religion. We broadcast live, and we're also on Olelo 54. Make sure to tune in, and we'll see you there. Thank you. Goodbye.
Welcome back to E Hana Kako on the ThinkTech Hawaii Broadcast Network. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute, talking with Elwin Ahu, candidate for Lieutenant Governor. We've been discussing how Elwin went from being a lawyer to a judge, a pastor, and now a political figure, and learning a little bit about his way of approaching leadership. In this final segment, I want to ask you, Elwin, what really is your vision of Hawaii in the years to come? You alluded to the fact that when we look at many statistics, we can get quite a bit afraid in terms of the cost of living, in terms of many other markers by which we're measured. If you look ahead into the next decade and beyond, what do you want to see us become, and how can we become that?
Yeah, that's an important question when you're looking at planning and visioning ahead, and you have to always know where you're starting from. And what I'd like to do is start from where my own family is. And so part of my involvement in this political process is because I was not seeing a future that my son would be able to live in. As I alluded to earlier, we adopted this little boy from China, and he's 12 years old now. And we thought that by bringing him from China, which is a very oppressed kind of a society if you're not in the upper class.
Right.
He was found in an open field when he was 15 months old and didn't have the medical care that he needed. But since then, he's back to full health. I wanted to live in a home and an environment that I grew up in, where we had a future. We had something we're looking forward to. But it's not happening now. Namely in terms of cost of living, cost of housing. I have another son who's 33. He's single. He will get married. He will have a family. I want him to live here. I want to be able to see my grandkids. And a lot of our young ones are moving away because either job situations, because there's not here to satisfy them. Housing costs, transportation, energy costs. So between Duke and I, and as we talked about with our policy teams, we agree on a lot of things. We want to see our kids grow up here. Livable wages that people have.
Now, I know you don't want to detract from the leadership role that Duke Iona will play in terms of policy determination and so forth, but you've been part of these policy discussions.
I sit in and I listen and I learn, and I learned a lot.
Sure. Are there any areas where you think you'd like to weigh in, or any things you might like to see happening policy-wise here in the state of Hawaii?
I think education is one that, hits me in the heart. We do have several relatives who are teachers.
Sure.
And, we hear the struggles that they have. My son was part of the public school system, and again, talking to his teachers and see how they have to dish out of their own pockets. In fact, some of the ways that we blessed them at Christmas time was, buying them gift cards so they didn't have to spend their own money buying school supplies. But you hear the struggles of teachers. And then you see curriculum popping up like Ono choices and that kind of thing. It's like, well, what's going on here? This is not the Hawaii that we grew up in. And I'd love to see us get into a place where we can have full confidence that when our child goes to school, he is going to learn the best that there has available, so he can be a contributor into our community and our society when he grows up.
Well, that's an important area in which a lieutenant governor can work very hard, and of course you're going to have that trade-off in terms of what areas you manage and so forth. You know, when you decided to run for office, you brought much to the table, and one of the things I've heard you refer to from time to time is the fact that you're part Native Hawaiian. And you even said at one point that was something very special, that you and Duke Iona are part Native Hawaiian. And I know you don't mean anything discriminatory by that, per se, but why is that something you consider special?
Yeah, it's not meant at all to draw any ethnic lines. I think when we say that in different arenas that we've spoken, what we're referring to is the fact that our hearts are planted here. You know, we've come out of the soil, so to speak. I mean, this is our native home. And so we will give everything. We will do everything that we can to make sure that this home of ours will be the home that people can enjoy, they can grow up in. But never to draw any kind of lines at all.
Certainly. Do you think that by being part Native Hawaiian in an office such as Lieutenant Governor, you can speak to some of the tensions that seem to be developing in the whole area of relationships between Hawaiians and non-Hawaiians?
Yeah, that plus, Keli'i, you know, we can't forget the fact that both Duke and I were judges. And so we have the ability and the experience and training to bring to the table people with various different backgrounds and positions and work towards a settlement.
That's kind of like what we say in Hawaiian, ho'oponopono, to set things right.
Yeah, and the fact that we are Native Hawaiians, I think, contributes to that. And so you put all that into this package, and I think we can really do some good for the state.
Well, these could be very, and indeed are, historic times, and you have the opportunity to cut a pathway, to define a way of leadership. I know you've studied leadership long and hard, and in your own pastorate, you've devoted a great deal of energy to defining leadership, training people in leadership, raising up leaders, and so forth. How do you see your continuation in that kind of function in the role of Lieutenant Governor?
Whether it's Lieutenant Governor or any other role, my definition of leadership, my definition of leader, is someone who's willing to serve. You're a servant first. And I don't know where we went wrong. Along the way see, when I was going to school, in elementary school, it was always known as a public servant.
That's right.
People in government were public servants. And suddenly, someone said, well, he's a public official. And once they became an official, then they would wait for their lay to be given to them. They would wait for their reserved parking stall. They would wait for someone to greet them and introduce them. You know, it just changed the whole dynamics of the position and the office. And to me, a leader is a servant. And so stepping into the role of Lieutenant Governor, it doesn't change. How do I serve you? How do I help you? And I think that has been shaping some of the policies that we're talking about as well. When we talk to small business owners, how do we serve you? How can the government make it better for you? Versus these other red tape steps you have to take before you can become a business. How do we get out of the way? How do we serve you better?
You know, how does someone retain his moral compass after going into public service? And you're not actually new at this. Going into the judgeship is a form of public service. Becoming a pastor, certainly in today's world, is something that thrusts you into the public eye with all of the same temptations that would be there in any kind of public office. And now going into politics, how do you maintain your character? How does the center hold as you move into this very, very public realm?
I think there are three things I can mention right now. One is a consistent faith. So I go to church every Sunday. That's just a part of my life. Having close brothers. I have a group of men that I meet with every Thursday morning. And, we study, we pray, we eat, we laugh, we do life together. And so if there's any point where any kind of temptation may want to cross my mind, I think of my brothers. Would I do this in front of them? And if I wouldn't, I can't. I don't do it. But I think the third factor is a really important one for me, and that's my wife. She is a short, Japanese, conservative young lady, but she holds me to what I need to do. And if there's anybody that can knock me on the head with a 2x4, and I'll say, oh, okay, yes, ma'am, it'll be her. I won't fight back with her, but she keeps me straight.
How important is character in public service? There was a very prominent public servant who had to explain on national television why his personal life had no bearing, he felt, upon his public life. And I remember the gestures he used. He said, here is my personal life. It's in this compartment. I set it aside over here when I have to deal with matters of state. What do you think about that?
Well, you got to understand that character shapes one's integrity. You can't have a character, you cannot be integrous, a man of integrity, if your character changes. Integrity, you get the root word from integer, which means one. Doesn't mean a part of or a fraction of. If you're a person of integrity, you're one. You're solid. And so if you have different characters that vary depending on what form you're part of, you're not a man of integrity or a person of integrity. And so I look at that very seriously. I take it very seriously.
Do you think we're going to hear these kinds of lessons from the office of the Lieutenant Governor?
You know,
discussion about integrity, about leadership, about public servanthood, and so forth.
Yeah, I'm not sure what arena it'll come out in, but that is part of my life. Something that also drives me to move forward with this role is to see and set a foundation for a lot of our young leaders. We have many young leaders coming up, great young leaders, not only in the political circle, but other arenas of our society, our community. And I want to be a part of helping them to shape that foundation for them. Because I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. You know, right. I want to be out in the surf. I want to be golfing. I want to enjoy my grandkids. But we need to
Haven't you said that before from other platforms?
Yeah, but we need to set a foundation, and I want to be a part of that. Duke feels the same way. We're not professional politicians, but we are men who are very much interested in our younger generation.
How can we get that younger generation engaged, whether it's in terms of being aware of the political process, voting, identifying candidates, serving on campaigns, building parties, or going into public service themselves? Any thoughts on how you can bring about a generation's interest in public service?
It's the same that is done in every other circle. You need great, good role models. How do you motivate a young boy who's playing Pop Warner football to play better football? You bring in an NFL star. See, when they see a good role model, they want to pattern themselves, their lives after. Then it turns into motivation. Oh, I want to be like that. I want to, the phrase, I want to be like Mike. I want to be like that. I want to shape. How do I get to be like that? They see a role model. We don't have the role models today.
Well, thank you. Well, in many ways, you have already established yourself as a role model, and perhaps we'll see you in another venue as well. But Elwin, thank you so much for being on our program. I appreciate it greatly. You've been listening to Elwin Ahu, candidate for Lieutenant Governor here in the state of Hawaii, 2014. I'm Keli'i Akina with the Grassroots Institute saying aloha to all of you. Thank you for watching ThinkTech Hawaii's broadcast network. Take a look at this program and many others at thinktechhawaii.com. Until next week, aloha.